All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. And it'll be a small discussion, and that's fine. Nothing huge about that. So, first up on my topic, one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks is, and we've talked about it before, but being a resource for law enforcement education and what they need to know about what we do. And um, I've gone through. I don't know if some of you guys have seen it, but FAA will release these little videos on Facebook, and they're slated towards law enforcement and what they need to know. And a lot of the information from a hobbyist standpoint has been incorrect. So I think for me, I would like to establish the FPVFC as a resource for law enforcement education and getting that information out there. But I need some help. What in terms of what do they need to know? How do we release that information to them? How should that be formatted? That kind of thing.
Just so quick question on it. What does uh most law enforcement like when they are able to fly drones? What do they get to learn about it? Because I feel like from what I've seen, some of them are pretty inexperienced at it.
Well, and that's the thing, and it's funny. Dan and I were kind of talking about some of the first times that we've seen commercial pilots out there, and in terms of commercial drone pilots, and just the other day, I was driving to work, and there was some construction on the side of the freeway. They're building a sound wall on the side, and there was an Inspire just hovering right over the freeway, which kind of drew my attention. And I was
I
like,
saw the 3600 doing that across a
yeah.
big bridge, and it's just chilling at the top of it, probably, I guess, 300 feet up, just over the freeway, 4-lane freeway.
So it led me to wonder, what kind of, number one, does this construction guy who's operating this drone have his 107? And that was kind of the first thought in my head. And I'm like, okay, so if he does, then why is he hovering over a freeway? And um, and Dan, you had brought up the first time you saw somebody flying commercially that they were struggling with just maintaining a hover or maneuvering it around, right?
Yeah, their maneuvering was not very smooth and very close to trees in a building. So I was concerned, but nothing happened. So maybe they were better than I thought.
Right.
Speaking of pilots not being able to maneuver, we had gotten a beach house last week, and there were, I think, 4 or 5 guys with various DJI vehicles between Mavics and Phantoms.
Right.
I took the dog out and saw a guy literally slam the Mavic 2 into the side of the house.
Nice.
Just full pitch forward into the side of the house from the back or from the front yard. And I'm kind of like, that is entertainment, because these guys were you could see all the lights up in the night sky, probably 10:30.
Right.
Fireworks started going off in the 4th.
Yep.
There were guys flying their Mavics all around and over the beach. And like, man, that's gonna come back.
So, I mean, to answer your question in terms of what law enforcement are taught when they're operating their drones, I don't have an answer for that question.
Okay.
I honestly think that they probably get the same training as anybody else commercially, with maybe that particular county or city's spin on what that training is. But they need to have their 107, and they need to have some kind of training, I'm sure. So but at the same time, my concern is not so much for, I guess, and Dave, I don't know what your thought on this is, but not so much for training them right off the bat, but more so letting them know what the actual laws are and what to look for as a and the real thing, because there's this old FAA law enforcement release that is way outdated at this point. And I just want to make sure that they're getting the correct information and not skewed information. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of what we need to, be relaying to them, what does that look like?
Part of what could be pretty helpful is, what type of flight movement, I guess, is quote unquote aggressive and what's just
Normal.
a kid playing with an inductrix in a park.
Okay.
And then also, how do you differentiate from someone on a commercial job, and how do you differentiate someone just flying recreationally?
Right. Okay.
I like the thought on aggressive versus normal, because there's a lot of discussion in the proposed laws, the proposed tort laws about intent, and they're trying to characterize, what was the intent? Was it careless or clueless, or was it malicious? Intentionally malicious, and I think that's if we can help provide a little bit of insight, to me, if someone is, flying at a completely empty parking lot and they're power looping some trees and they're going in and out of gaps, but there's no one there, then that is, that's thoughtful, that's it's safe. They're not flying over people, over cars, that they're not flying at night, they're flying under 400 feet, they're checking all the boxes, then that's normal flight. To me, aggressive flight is, I'm flying at night, I'm flying into a building, I'm flying into fireworks, I'm flying over people. Those are, of course, not legal, but they're also aggressive, and that I'd say that has, that crosses the line on intent, I guess, in my book.
One interesting thing I learned from watching that FAA video is about flying at night, and that for recreational use, you can fly at night. It just has to follow the same rules, that you have to maintain visual line of sight to your drone. So at night, if you put a bright light on it, like, you could fly far away.
I thought that changed from 336 to 349. This was a new video?
Came out with new
if you watch the FAA's video on YouTube that I posted some links to like a week ago.
Okay.
I put there should be a timestamp in there to when they talk about that, maybe. I forget. I can find it though.
All right. Well, that's what I'm gonna. As the retired guy of this crew, that's what I'm gonna research. I'll follow up on that.
So what I've seen that's interesting is there's this whole thing about, anti-pollution people. They're going to shut down Gatwick with a bunch of phantoms. And
oh dear.
And so
that's what we need.
That's bad. Yeah.
How can you shut down an operation like that?
So there was, and if anybody follows some of the commercial groups that are out there, there was some kind of festival in Miami, I want to say, and don't quote me on that. I don't know if that's exactly where it was, but there was a bunch of guys that were hired by the festival and by the city that were contracted to shoot video of the festival from drones and whatnot. Well, unbeknownst to them, there was another company there that was testing an anti-drone
counter UAS.
Counter UAS system. And basically the system was it was a radio blaster, so it just pumped out radio frequencies, and once your drone got about 50 feet away from you, it just dropped out of the sky because you had no control over it any longer. So video was breaking up, and they were saturating both the control bands and the video bands.
That sounds like a great idea.
Not really, no. And this, from what I've heard, that this company is kind of in a bit of trouble over this, and because they counter UAS is distinctly under the jurisdiction of DoD and DHS, right?
And DoD,
really?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is explicitly illegal.
Yes.
And so if you as a private citizen, if you pull a counter UAS, it's a big it's a felony.
Yeah.
To be simple.
When third-party companies want to come out with counter defense systems for instance, anti-terroristic quadcopters, they can't. It's all left up to government agencies.
Well, not necessarily. When they are testing these particular things, if they're, I would presume that they have authorization, in testing facilities to do this kind of stuff. But to deploy it out in the public, unbeknownst to anybody else,
that's the difference.
is a completely other story. So.
Okay.
And so there are ways to that, and I'm sure there's as many ways as you could possibly think of for counter UAS. However, and it can be done, but at the same time, at least in the U.S., it's under the jurisdiction of very two distinct organizations and or agencies, and that's it. So. What they choose to do in the UK, I'm not sure, but I think the biggest thing is that here, at least for the time being, that's where we stand. So, but I don't know. That sounds like a bad deal. All around.
So if we could circle back as to what we want to do with law enforcement, there is the LEAP program. So there's the FAA Law Enforcement Assistance Program. I think it's LEAP. That's what it stands for.
Yes, it is.
So my thought is, if I were to the little uptown New York State town I live in has 3 or 4 drones. And so it's just like what you guys said. They have the fellas using them have no idea how to use them. So if I walked in, I'm an older guy, so I'm not some a millennial telling them how to run their lives. So they're not going to be put off by that. But if I want to convey, here's my understanding of LEAP. Here are the various laws as we understand them, things that you as a law officer can request of a person flying a drone. I like the comment of aggressive versus normal, and then potentially we can offer, depending on the individual, we can offer assistance to learn how to fly. If we do that, then it probably whoever offers would need their 107, because that would be a furtherance of business in my interpretation.
Yeah, I would say so. Honestly, I don't think. Well, yes and no. I think if we did it on a volunteer basis, it would be completely different. But if it was, we were getting compensated for whatever training we were doing, it would be another thing. But
is law enforcement a business?
No, but if you individually were making money off of training those folks, that's a furtherance of a business.
Correct, but if you were helping somebody else who was a business, even if you weren't getting paid, you still would be.
There's no denying that you help with training or whatever, because it's kind of like feeding fish to the bear. It's just you did it right there in front of them, and
right.
Then if you don't have a 107, you're kind of in big trouble.
So when it comes to what do you guys think? I mean, should we dedicate a section of the website to law enforcement? Should we develop like some kind of presentation or program that we can take to some of these? And I'm totally willing to test these out in my local area. Heck, I've got 10 different cities that I can hit here.
So who do we think would be more open or responsive, or less pushback, law enforcement or emergency response?
Honestly, I feel like
response probably wouldn't have as big of a. Actually, now that I say that, it's kind of stupid, but law enforcement is also very, I guess, on the lookout for it now because drones are seen as a
Yeah.
it's gonna
Yeah.
be
Yeah, I
for
like and they're so yeah, I like that from that angle. Because the
Mhm.
approach is the FAA has given you the authority to challenge people flying drones.
Right.
And it could be like some of the crazy gun laws in New York State. You ask any police officer about them, and they roll their eyes, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna ask someone with a legal concealed carry to show me that he's only got 7 bullets in the magazine, not 10 in the 10 bullet magazine." So literally that was one of the laws that it's now off the books, but it was on the New York State books. So, is this in that same category of like, you can now challenge a drone pilot for their FAA registration number on the aircraft. They have to be able to articulate what safety guidelines they're using. They have to have a spotter, and they have to be able to demonstrate the proof that they have the registration. So they have to have the FAA ID card with them.
And
And when we pass it, when they have a test, they have to show proof of the test. Am I
Right.
missing any others?
I think it hit most of it right there.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
the other
also
thing
just
that I think
generally
would be
how to
go ahead.
when approached by an officer, what not to do.
Right.
Don't
You know,
Okay.
throttle back and let
I
it
like
land right at your toes.
So yeah, so what not to do? Because I know, for me it's
Well-
having someone walk up behind me, and surprise me is not my favorite thing. So, let's
Important
I
Well,
know there
right,
should be a
but
spotter.
The important
the
thing would
I
be
mean
to,
just I mean
make it known
cooperate.
that you're friendly because especially, I guess home built quadcopters still kind of look scary in a way. It's not a Phantom, and that's kind of the disadvantage of them is they're not commercially available ready to fly. So they're carbon fiber blocks with electronics on them and XT60s poking out and batteries hanging off the bottom.
So I really like this angle in terms of how do you approach someone who's a drone operator. And so the police are supposed to lower the anxiety in any situation. So if we set up a couple of questions that are, if you'll forgive the pun, disarming as opposed to escalating a situation. So, hey, that's awesome. How long you been flying? That's cool. How high is that flying? These are questions to give the officer data, but not to create a confrontation.
And approach it friendly and don't immediately turn into this argument about I'm right, you're wrong. Turn into a very mutual thing where hey, cool, you got your documentation. All right, cool, have fun.
Steve, you had something to say earlier, bud?
No, it was pretty much the same as what was said in the last minute or two here. Yep, I agree with all that.
All right, just wanted to make sure. So, all right. So, we've got basically, covering what their authority would be, covering what the rules actually are. I'm just going down my list here. Aggressive versus normal flight, so what that would look like. Recreational versus commercial. How to approach somebody who's flying a drone. That kind of stuff. And the reason I go down this road with this stuff is because, like Dave was saying, is once the test is out and once law enforcement has been enabled to do all this stuff, I would like us to be on the front side of having the resources for that we can point to and say this is the actuality of it all, as opposed to the hype, the hysteria, the misinformation, that kind of stuff that comes from sources that we've all seen in the past. And I mean, am I wrong in that?
No, not at all.
No,
And
I agree.
flying a Phantom is one thing, but when you're zipping and zooming through trees and stuff, and you can just fly back in 2 seconds, land at your toes, and then pick it up. It's kind of, what the heck is that thing?
Right.
It makes it very. It escalates very quickly, as opposed to you've got this little just going back and forth.
Okay, so let's look at it from a couple different perspectives. So, and I want to kind of carry this over to the next topic, but if from an initial standpoint, what does that education look like? Is that a document that we put together? Is that room on a web page that we put together? Is that example videos that we provide? Or
one of them is a video, identifying various types, I guess. So, you've got a matrice, which is typically used as a very commercial aircraft for hauling, versus a Phantom and a Mavic, which are typically used for
aerial photography. Right.
Yeah. And then you've got, smaller home-built race quads, and then and wings are a completely separate thing, which is basically an RC plane at that point. But and then you've got X class, which hopefully aren't just flying in a park.
Right. So
that can get dangerous.
Now from that initial standpoint, is Dave, and Dan, what are your thoughts on putting that on the website, or do we provide like some of the videos like the FAA is putting out that we publish on Facebook, or is it kind of a combination of all those things?
I like the idea of a classification and it'll provide a taxonomy, because I think we're missing some of that, because right now it's drones equals bad,
right.
suspicious, and if we say, well, little equals low risk,
right.
not much bad can happen.
I would even include
if you have a couple pilots go out and who are actually active pilots, and you say, hey, can you make an overview video of, well, hey, here's a 5-inch freestyle quad, and it's not going to kill you if it's just flying around 300 yards away. Here's a Mavic. Here's various types of things, and it's introduced by actual pilots and not just someone that sees it on the internet.
So kind of what, like, Dave, what I'm kind of gathering is, like, what is a UAS primer? Like, distinguishing between the different types, the different sizes, the capabilities, that kind of thing, and kind of spinning it off from there.
Yeah, because if we're this is like thinking back to what we did in World War II, right? The profiles of aircraft. We trained people in civil defense across the country to be able to identify friend or foe aircraft, and so this is what's in the air. This is a problem. This is not a problem.
Right. Okay. Cool. I like that approach.
And so, whoops, racing quads, video platforms. Are there other general categories?
I would say fixed wing would be definitely a category.
Right. Yeah.
Is there a separate category, or can there be a separate category for a kid flying, say, a Cyma X5C in the
little toy? Yeah.
Not
toy class.
Anything harmful or even
that's
risk.
So, no is the short answer. And the reason being is, I pressed Jay Merkel on that, and the answer was they're all aircraft. And then one of the FAA folks said, we're making these things smaller and smaller and smaller, and they're capable in a tiny size, so we're very hesitant to characterize anything as a toy.
Okay, that makes
so
sense.
I was, it was I was a little surprised at the abrupt answer I initially got, but then they backed it up with, they obviously had thought about it.
No, and that almost makes sense, because if someone just play it off as, well, I was just flying a toy, I didn't know I was 800 feet away from an airport, then that's
right.
That's an easy scapegoat, but
right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the RID and geofencing, and that's that's what it's like. How do we help protect people from themselves. If you're careless or clueless, but not malicious, we want to help you.
Is there going to be some kind of communication to or from the big box resellers then? Like the Best Buy,
and
the Walmarts that are selling these, in quotes, toys.
I think honestly a lot of that from the language in the reauthorization is going to fall on the manufacturers, and both from a quasi certification standpoint, certification of the aircraft almost situation, to providing the documentation within the packaging, I guess, to follow up on that. But with registration and what the rules are and that kind of thing, and I'm curious what that landscape's going to look like.
Now the problem with that is, if someone's looking for a cool Christmas present and they see, oh look, here's a drone, and then on the back of the box in giant big bold letters is, now you got to do these things before you can touch a controller. You got to register it. You got to do X, Y, Z. That's kind of a big,
Right.
turn
off.
And saying, yeah, I might want to shy away from that.
Is there a way for us to work with the manufacturers so that they can, in the packaging, say, hey, go to this website to get all the information you need then?
Make a quick start guide for flying safe.
Yeah, just point to the coalition website.
Yeah, that's basically what the main page of our site's for.
Yeah, if you click on our website, we recently updated it, and that front page has pretty much the basics of what you need to do to get flying.
Yeah,
so
as a recreational flyer. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
would it be worthwhile to work with the manufacturers to get that?
That's something we can definitely look at. We're gonna have to reach out to, figure out who those people are that we reach out to, and and get some notices out there. There are, and a lot of them are overseas, and that's going to be the hard part. So
right, I was going to say you probably have to learn how to speak Chinese.
Mandarin is required. But certainly what DJI has, I think it's over 70% market share in the video platform, and they are. There's certainly DJI is all over working to maintain the ability to be able to be flown in the United States. I don't know if anyone's seen the recent articles about that they may do
building facilities,
doing manufacturing, and they may have to change the firmware, and so, but it's all possible. So great question. I think that might have been Steve who brought that up, and I think we're at at early days, but we won't forget it, and please don't let us forget it.
Yeah. In DJI's behalf, I have seen them be pretty aggressive taking on the media as well.
Yeah. Really fascinating. I've rarely seen
it. Afraid to lay down facts on it at all.
Yeah, going after the BBC. Amazing.
Yep. Yeah. All right, so good discussion on that. Where are we at on time? Okay, so we're and not that I'm going to cut anybody short. If it goes long, it goes long. But I kind of want to move on to the next thing, and it kind of falls into the same category, but educating the public. What kind of do we want to go down that same path with them and kind of cut out the law enforcement type stuff, or what does that look like on a quick scale here?
Something that could be really important in both the first topic and just general public, I guess, is having a spotter with you can kind of be important, especially in that is that if someone kind of starts walking up and goes, hey, what you doing, and your spotter can tell you, hey, start landing, you can start explaining stuff, that could make or break a first off talk.
Okay, absolutely. So think of this from the perspective of not general public FPV people or general public drone flyers, but general public everybody else. Think of this
what
as
I'm pointing at
okay.
especially is if someone comes up and you're alone flying and they're kind of tapping you on the shoulder with your goggles on, you kind of get freaked out almost.
Yep.
It's like being woken up from in the middle of a dream where
Right.
what's going on here? You know, where am
Yeah.
I? Versus
Yeah.
if you have
Okay.
a spotter with you, it can give you a little bit more time to clear your head and calm down while you land, and then you can carefully explain stuff.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I've got two things I could say about that. First, as for people who are first time into the hobby, it would be great if all the major store or places in the United States that sell stuff, you know, they get FPVs, the Puro flips and whatnot. If we could get them to include some sort of little card that has information about us and how to learn how to fly safely. So that would just sort of catch those first time people somehow.
Okay.
But then for the general public, something more along the lines of what Bruce Simpson's talking about, trying to sway the media around the world to show drones in a positive light. And he's got plans to have that some sort of a massive campaign to help kick that off.
And that's kind of where I was coming from is kind of negating some of the bad press that we as drone pilots get a lot of the time.
And we have to really promote the heck out of the good press, like that news article from Knoxville showing the racetrack there.
And Evan Turner. Yep.
Yeah, their local news did a little segment on it, and if we could get that site to get tons more views than they normally would get, that would show them that there's interest in that.
Right.
So a good that we'd have to work triple time almost on getting positive stuff out there because positive stuff isn't going to sell as well.
Yeah, you're right. We do.
Drone just flew into the White House type thing. That's going to sell. You know.
Well, of course, catastrophe sells better than anything else, but
right.
You know, I would say that, you know, not only do we need to provide good material, but we need to, like Dan was saying, like promote the material that is coming out, that is positive. You know, whether it's stuff like Nick's, his company of what is it? The drone
parks.
Yes, drone parks. Thank you, and the stuff that they're doing. I mean, they're winning awards, and that's amazing, and I'm really impressed with that.
Yeah, and if you see these news articles or you see those videos, share them, watch them, make sure other people see them and watch them.
Absolutely.
All that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, getting that kind of stuff to go viral is kind of the beginning of everything. And
so we can build on the FAA mid-November drone safety week, and Saturday and Sunday is recreational. So we can, if we come up with something this is what we put forward as important on those days, we might be able to get some amplification of of what we're about.
Absolutely.
Through even the FAA.
Yep.
And hopefully the AMA, since they're being asked to focus on that's an interesting thought. Most locations around the United States have a AMA flying field, and the AMA at the headquarters level is very keen to be positive about FPV. And so if we rang up a couple of clubs and said, look, you know, in mid-November, you're probably going to do an event. Would you like a drone pilot to do a demo flight for you at the during that weekend?
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing is you don't just have to, I guess, you know, create a whole new thing. You can expand off of other pre-existing programs and
that's where I'm thinking.
AMA is enormous and it's a trusted organization, and so if you can get them to start saying it, then it'll lead credibility.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the numbers are interesting. AMA is 195,000 members, and there are 1.3 million recreational drones. So it's a matter of, you know, getting folks coordinated and to you know, focused as a group, and that's definitely one thing that the AMA has going for it in the U.S.
So one other thought I had is not so much for public opinion, but for the FAA's use. If we could, on July 23rd, when the Lance goes live for recreational use, if we could have a massive campaign to get thousands of people to use it that day, to show the FAA that, yes, there's that many flights that happen every day that are safe and no one gets hurt. Maybe
Just
they
Right.
grossly
every
underestimated
single
how
one
many
of your
flights there
batteries and
are.
go out and
Talk about your stress
start a new
test of the
flight
Lance
every time
system.
on Lance.
I'm sorry, there were a couple of conversations going on there.
Like when
Josh?
GameStop does 5 for 5 and shuts down the site because too many people go to it.
Yeah, and that would be my concern. But that's on the FAA at that point. Is that would definitely be a stress test of the Lance system. Some poor guy's probably going to be pulling his hair out.
But just think of the news coverage that could get.
Absolutely, and that's where that was my next thought. Is just like how much amazing
Drone
coverage
pilots
we could get from that.
Shut down Lance system. FAA
Yep.
rethinking whole system.
Yeah, we
Yep.
don't want to shut it down. We want to rejoice.
Exactly.
So and obviously the focus, it has to be in controlled airspace. So it's probably looking for FPV clubs or racing chapters around cities, because that's where the majority of controlled airspace is. That's where it's going to make a difference.
Yep.
Is
We need
that
to
going
put-
live for everybody or just
Yes.
the test group? Okay, everybody.
No,
All right.
it's live for everybody, July 23rd.
Awesome.
And there's a webinar coming up on the 18th, 4
Yep,
p.m.
and
4 p.m. Eastern.
Yep, I actually have the link for all of that in my notes here. I was going to post it before the end here.
Great. Thanks.
Is there
So-
going to be something on the website on how to use that real quick?
Yep. Once I'm going to sit in on this on the FAA's webinar, and I'm going to we'll create a little how-to, including which apps to use and that kind of thing, to be able to use Lance, and we'll give a little bit of a resource there, and we'll blast an update out.
Right, and Lance
Awesome.
will be supported on, as you just pointed out, Josh, a number of different applications, right?
Mhm.
Air Map, Kitty Hawk, and the FAA has listed them out. So, we are anticipating that each of those apps will be refreshed prior to or on 723, and then it will be absolutely appropriate to figure out, okay, how do I use this darn thing?
Yeah, that was my
So
guess too. I
that's
have not
another
seen an
question.
update to the app on my phone yet, and I'm curious how they're gonna do that, and what you have to fill in, what kind of information they require, and all of that
Yep.
good
There was
stuff.
a video on that Ken Herron or somebody made it. I was looking at Lance stuff and he popped up for it and I watched it.
Yeah, there's
It's a
all
pretty
kinds of
simple
Lance
system.
stuff for Part 107 pilots, but nothing
Yeah.
yet for
I
recreation.
don't know if recreational pilots are going to have the same system for it. It's just going to be a little tick box that says recreational or 107.
Right.
Also, is Before You Fly ever going to be updated? Or what is
So
that?
that's the next thing that I was actually going to talk about. So they just released a RFI, which is a request for information, on the Before You Fly app. The comment period is open through August 2nd, and
Okay.
basically they're looking for feedback on, from what I'm gathering from this, it's the funding and continued expansion of the Before You Fly app. So
Honestly, if they could just simplify the system down to either the online map that I actually got shown on here,
yeah,
or
the FAA
Before You
facility
Fly,
map. Yeah.
just simplify it down to one of those two, because that's another problem with the whole FAA ecosystem is you'll never find one straight answer to it. There's always
Right.
going to be differentiating opinions mixed in with it, and nothing's ever for sure.
So one of the webinars that I sat in on, they really pushed the FAA facility map. They basically have said, even in this latest article that they released, that the facility maps is the best course of action for figuring out where you can fly when they shut down the ability to call towers and whatnot.
That's the funny
So-
thing. When I was shown that, there isn't a facility within 40 miles of me that I would even need to think about calling.
Exactly.
Everything on the before you fly is gone because it was all little helicopter heliports and stuff.
Yep.
And don't have to worry about those. Those are
right. So that's one of the things that I would like to posit forward is that they need to transition over to the facility maps in the app. But
or
basically
make a
the
version of the facility map. That'd be
right.
good too. I'd like to have
Yep.
that. The
But
website is really slow.
the information that they are looking for is whether the proposed collection of information is necessary for the FAA's performance, the accuracy of the estimated burden of collecting that information, ways for the FAA to enhance the quality, utility, and clarity of the information, and ways that the burden could be minimized without reducing the quality of the information. So, that's something that, and I'm going to post that here. Let's see. Hang on one sec.
I mean, what I find is really difficult, I guess, about FPV in the first place is just the amount of overflowing and overlapping information. If there was ever a possibility of it being simplified down, that would be one of the most beneficial things I would even dream of.
Well, and that's one of the things that we've worked very hard with the FPVFC and our website and the information that we push out is that we do everything we can to simplify that down to the basics and make it understandable for everybody. And we go through extreme lengths to make sure our information is accurate so that we're not putting out any misinformation out there. And that's
much appreciated as well. That change. When I
or something that you would like us to say in that comment, let us know so that we can kind of push that forward and discuss and kind of get that worked into the final draft of that. So, and then last, before we wrap up, is I'm going to post the Lance webinar, as well as a link to the FAA webinars in general. So the first link there is to the general webinars page, and they have been on they've been doing pretty regular UAS webinars. And then the second link there is a direct register for that Lance webinar. It's at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, or as Dave was saying, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So
4 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, Mountain Time. I don't know. I'm in Arizona. We don't do times.
Yeah. 4 p.m. 4 p.m. ET.
4 p.m. So, if that's something, I encourage you to sit in on that. Again, the more presence that we can make at, stuff like this, the more the FAA feels the presence of the recreational side of the hobby or side of the drone UAS ecosystem. So.
So on the topic of present, something that, at least an idea that I had for expanding the FPVFC is when I first, heard about it, I'd been flying for years and I had never heard a lick of it from anyone. And I guess if y'all could reach out to other pilots that, have larger channels and can convey that information, that would, I think, help, because no one had ever mentioned it or talked about it, and it kind of made it hard to find out about the FPVFC.
So the FPVFC, we've only been around for about 9 months now, 10 months.
Yeah, that would also explain why I never heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. So we just started in October of last year. So, and we just got our 501c3 in February this year, February.
February
okay.
25. Mm-hmm.
So, we're a relatively new organization, and so a lot of people are still learning about us, and we are reaching out to pilots. And one of the things we were actually talking about earlier was some of the pilots that are starting to back us and communicate our organization out to their people. So it is coming, and it's been a long road to get to this point where we're at, and it's a long road going forward, but we're all here doing the thing. So yeah, we are relatively new, but at the same time, the word is spreading. So scrolling through Facebook.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, we need to know
So-
what of our advertising efforts are actually working out there.
Exactly.
No, I had never heard of it, and I was scrolling through and, hey, what's that? Oh, a body that I guess advocates for pilots. Seems
Yep.
kind of neat. Let's check it out.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been surprised that when we post stuff to like the Rotor Riot Facebook group, it doesn't usually get any traction. So
No, and that's the problem is when there's 32,000 people in that group, it kind of, because I turn the notifications off to, I guess, the admins only or whatever, and so it just
Right.
goes right past. I never see it.
And that's the problem is and that's one of the things I've kind of posited every time I share something to the Rotor Riot group, is that because there are so many people posting, and a post gets lost very quickly.
But at the same time, you want to post somewhere that has enough people in it for
Exactly.
people to see it, and you also don't want to post too much because then people are going to get annoyed by it and just kick it off as something that they don't want to see because it's probably spam or whatever.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
we'll have
we've
to do
got-
things like trying to
Fine
game
line
the
about it.
system where if we post in Rotor Riot, all of us need to make a comment on it, like it, make sure it regularly,
bump it.
yeah, gets up to the top. The same kind of thing on Reddit and other places. The more of us that can sort of all do it at once to bump it up to the top and make sure people see it. But like you said,
Yep.
not do
Yep.
that constantly, not get in people's faces too much.
Yeah, we're also
That's
asking
something I was considering doing the Get FPV Learn, a few things on that, and I was considering, doing an article about, well, what are the lobbying organizations for pilots overall?
Well, on a side note, if you want to work with the Get FPV Learn, let me know. I actually am the community manager for that. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, that'd be kind of cool. Okay.
So hit me up after this, and we can talk about that.
Okay.
I'm always surprised at the amount of conspiracy theorists out there with oh my gosh, Rotor Riot's getting bought out by Red Cat. Hey, the president's on the board of the coalition. Nefarious
we haven't
things
heard
are
anything
coming.
else about Red Cat buying it, so I think that was just kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, that's what gets people's
I haven't
attention.
heard anything else about it.
Right.
Right.
Again, the perceived catastrophe is what makes
Right.
is
People.
what
Yeah.
makes an impression.
Yeah. So well said. Oh my gosh, something nefarious is happening, and this is Dave Messina, and so as the president of FPVFC, it's the CEO of Red Cat is on the board of FPVFC, and he's supposed to provide guidance to the group. And as I've said, the people you hear on the phone, Josh, Dan, and me, are about 99% of the decision-making authority of FPVFC. So it is a non-stock, 501c3, meaning we are, the FPVFC is not owned. We run it, and it's a nonprofit. And
Oh yeah, no, I get that.
I'm not defensive. The reason I'm being very pedantic about it is that this call is recorded, and if it goes up, I want to make sure that anyone listening to this understands the full reference.
Oh, I got you. Sorry, I thought you were responding to me directly, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up, and it helps because we're definitely trying to quell and calm people down. It's like, no, we really are working here to advocate for the FPV community. All of us are doing this on a volunteer basis at this point. Were the FPVFC to become wildly successful in the future, we could take salaries, but right now we are not. So yeah, we appreciate the support and appreciate the ideas. So good, yeah, and I like the and we are working with one of the things that we're doing with the the influencer pilots that we know is we've put together a briefing sheet, and we might post that up on our website because it might be useful to members.
Anyone. Yeah.
Sure, anybody. Who are you? What do you do? What have you been doing? How can you help the community? How what's the value of being a member? Very simple, very direct, and then we are asking the influencer pilots to mention FPVFC on their videos, on their YouTube channels, and also when they asked about, hey, I'm just getting into this. What do I need to do to be legal to fly in the United States? We want them to instinctively say, yeah, just go to the fpvfc.com, and there, right on the front page, you'll see what it takes to get in the air. And so we're certainly, it's a good suggestion. We're looking for other suggestions like that. How do we increase our reach across the U.S.?
Very good. Any other comments on tonight's topics?
Nope. It seems
All right.
good.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining. Small but effective crowd. I appreciate it. So if you have any questions, feel free to hit us up, or just pop in general and hit us up. So I will go ahead and call it for this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Great.
Hopefully
Thank you
see
very
you all
much.
again in
Thank
2
you.
weeks.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes. Take care.